So I wanted to talk about the books that I've been reading, and with that, a, a topic from that. So y'all know I've been reading the Little House on the Prairie books, and this is These Happy Golden Years. Technically, there's one after that's called The First 4 Years, but it's not really like a full book because that one was published. The First 4 Years was published after Laura Ingalls passed away, and I think they found it in her notes or something. I don't know if she ever intended for it to be published, but I think they were just kind of like, okay, yeah, like let's publish this just as it is. So it's a lot shorter and it's just like different vibes, kind of. So I had forgotten a lot. Basically, I don't know if you guys have read these, but I grew up, with my mom reading these to me and my sister. And I know I've talked about them here and there. You guys have probably seen me post them on IG. But basically, she was like a pioneer in the late 1800s, and her family were, going west. It was the time in the United States where the government was, wanted people to move west to settle. So it's just kind of interesting to read these from her point of view because each book is like a different phase, in her life as she's growing older and like moving west. So it's also really interesting. I guess some people wanted these to be pulled from shelves because there's like racism in these, towards Native Americans. I don't know if it was in this one or the one before, but they talk about, like minstrel shows. But I think it's interesting because it just shows, the mindset of people at that time, of the settlers. I don't know. What do y'all think? Because it's not like I'm reading this like, oh yeah, this is definitely promoting racism. It's just like showing, and it's not like heavy in these books. Like it's not like you're reading this like, oh my God, but there's definitely moments where, they talk about the Native Americans or like whatever. And like her mom will make a comment or like, so I think to an extent, it's like, this is history. Like this is showing like how people thought at that time. And I think to like erase that, or I mean, I guess it's different maybe if this is like considered a kid's book or something, but like if you're to erase that, it's like, okay, then how do you explain why things are the way that they are now? If we're just to like pretend like, oh yeah, people never thought that way. People were always just like so accepting of one another. It's like, then how do you explain everything? It's definitely like, it's like interesting. It's like, But what do y'all think? Like, is this something worth pulling from shelves? Like, I don't know. Anyway, besides that, so these books are very nostalgic to me, which is kind of the topic I wanted to talk about. But I don't really remember like these later books. It's like By the Shores of Silver Lake, I feel like is very defining and like, okay, she's starting to kind of grow up. And after that, there's like The Long Winter, which I barely remembered anything from that as well. And then this one where she's like, starts dating her new bae and whatnot. And this one she really like becomes a woman. I didn't really remember much from those. And I think it's because like as a kid, it's like that just wasn't really interesting to me. But now it's like, I want the tea. Like what was dating like then, like, or courting. What was it like when you grew up and like turned 18 and like she got married, I think, at 18, had her first kid, or had her only child at 19. I think she had another kid after that. But he, like, died really soon after birth. Kind of sad. She never had another kid. But this book is definitely my favorite one. I can now make that claim. Because, first of all, it's just a lot more relatable. Not, like, so relatable. But it's just, like, those themes of, like, growing up, becoming a woman, like, leaving your family, starting your own life. And this one, it's like, does anyone even care about this? But this one is right after, the book, The Long Winter. Blizzards were just happening all the time and they like almost died of starvation basically. But it's, kind of a kid's young adults book. So she's not making it as dark as it could be, but it's just like, oh my God, like people really lived like this and they survived because her bae saved the town. But then this book is just like the year after that and just like how much better everything is and like the springtime. So I just felt like it was such a perfect book to read like while it's kind of becoming spring now. And just the way she talks about just like I don't know, even just like the flowers as she's like walking to town, or like just the nature, and just like this book is just painted as such like a rosy picture. And it is like fictionalized, so I was kind of looking up the history and whatnot. Not me like loving history. It's just like so interesting. I think it's like, and I know I've said this before, but I think it's just like the realization as you get older, like, oh, all of this shit really happened to people, you know, like me, like humans, like they had like thoughts, like I'm reading this wondering like, how did that emotionally feel to go through a winter like that, like, and almost die of starvation? Because like she kind of talks about it like, oh yeah, every day felt the same and like whatever, but it's like, wow, you actually went through that. Like, and I know I've said this before too, but it's kind of like I first kind of realized stuff like that about my parents. Like, you know, you kind of grow up and you realize like, oh, it's not like my parents have all the answers or they know everything. Like, they've been getting older as I've been getting older. They've been learning as I've been learning and trying to figure it out. Like, no one really knows anything. So, and I think not that this book is like, or these books are the prime example of this, but reading that book, Lies My Teacher Told Me, you know, like the real history of the United States. It's like they just made such a good point of like, you know, so much of history, especially U.S. history, is glossed over and just like made to seem like, oh, this picture perfect, you know, like everything, like this Disneyfied, like, oh, this was the hero and like these were the bad guys, and it's just very boring in a lot of ways. But when you actually learn about like, I don't know, like just reading like people's diaries and like the real truth of stuff, like the ugly and like everything, it's like, oh my God, like this really happened to actual people, and it's like, this is why things are the way that they are today, and it like shit affects us still today. Like, it's just so interesting. And again, this is a fictionalized series, so it's not like this is like them like, oh my God, yeah, this is like, wow. But just, I think the fact that it is like their everyday lives, and like it low-key wasn't that long ago, you know, like over 100 years ago, but still, it's not like hundreds of years ago. So I'm not like necessarily recommending that you read this, but it has just been really nice, I guess, like especially reading this one. I just felt so cozy, and like it's just, this book is very good vibes. And she starts dating her bae, and it's just like so interesting. So it's like, yeah. But then reading the real history, like, yeah, like actually like they were homeless a lot of the time, and like just like, oh, that does not sound like a good time. Like, bro, it's just so, it's like if your crops fail, like you fail. You can't just go, I mean, they had like stores and stuff, but like they just, and especially in the earlier books, relied so much on like the land around them and whatnot. Anyway, so if you've read them, let me know, but it's just been so interesting to reread them as an adult and kind of look up, you know, the real history, and like just think about that, like, wow, this really, not, you know, again, it's fictionalized, so it's not like this exactly happened, all of it, but just like the concept of like, it was girls like me. American Girl dolls. On a more serious note though, I've also been reading, because I've been reading these, but I've also been trying to read a serious book at the same time. This is Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. This is a classic, so I've heard, but it's just a collection of essays specifically about California in the 60s. And yeah, it's just so, this is also kind of like, gives me a nostalgic vibe, just in how she talks about California. Like, her writing is just so good. So if you haven't read this, I would definitely recommend that you read it. And it's just kind of interesting that, you know, each kind of chapter, I guess, is like a different essay. And there's like, it's kind of, yeah. So the first section is lifestyles in the Golden Land. So each essay is just about, you know, different people or like different things that happen in California. And then I'm currently on section 2, which is personals. So it's just kind of stuff that's happened to her. The last one I read was like, oh no. Yeah. Well, like she wrote one about keeping a notebook and just like how she always had a notebook as a kid, and just like kind of explained. It was pretty relatable. And then the last one, 7 Places of the Mind. So it's just like, I don't know, reading this too, it was, oh, like just so perfect to read for this time of year, especially since I'm in California, not to flex on, but like just how she's describing, you know, the scenes, and just like, especially in the 60s. I don't know, like I'm just imagining almost like this Lana Del Rey music video, like very chic, but like kind of just like that California vibe, you know? I just love like, oh my God, it's just so good. So if you guys haven't read it, I would recommend, but I can't wait to read more of her books. And what was another one I have? I forget. She has like other books I know about, specifically like LA, and just like it's just so fascinating to read, and just like the style of writing. Like I don't want to say it's like romantic, but it's just like it's just this very specific vibe that is really enjoyable to read. And again, it's almost like I'm in like a Lana Del Rey music video, like and I say that like in the best way, like her older videos, you know, like Born to Die era, like that's what I'm like imagining.